Hello again. This is the 13th of July 2021, and this is an orty-thorty that is about bereavement with a particular emphasis on pregnancy loss. CW, give it a miss if that is a particularly sensitive subject for you at the moment. Prompted to do this because last Sunday, I had a miscarriage. It was a planned pregnancy. I knew I was pregnant. I'd taken a test. I started telling friends and family, and suddenly I just wasn't pregnant anymore. The life I'd imagined with my second child was not going to happen, at least for quite some time yet. And I find there's a lot online. There's a lot of support for people who've had miscarriages, but very little, nothing at all actually, specifically for autistic people who've had miscarriages. And nothing about bereavement for autistic people at all in general. And I think it is a subject that somebody needs to talk about, so here I am trying to fill the void. Because we do experience things like attachment and probably love and loss differently from neurotypical people. There is quite a lot of evidence suggesting that, and we do express our feelings differently, as we all know. I think one thing that I have actually discussed with other people on some of my support groups is that we don't seem to go through the same grieving process that we're expected to. We don't do the same kind of immediate expression of grief, the sort of crying, feeling like it's the end of the world. Even when we lose people very close to us, our response is generally fairly a lot more measured than we're expected. How we're expected to behave and to respond, which can almost look like we don't care. Of course we do care. We care very deeply about the people around us. Because of our our methods of emotional expression, probably also because of a few kind of autistic traits such as alexithymia and such, aphantasia maybe. We don't necessarily behave as we are expected to, let's say. You go to a funeral and everyone around you is crying and you're just sitting there thinking, oh, yeah, that's a good funeral, nice eulogy, yeah. Bye-bye, Grandma, Which it can look quite harsh to people who are expecting you to be taking part in the general show of grief, and also not particularly caring when famous people die. Although we do attach to famous people, they're often special interests. We often get parasocial relationships with fictitious characters or celebrities. We, as a group, You know, obviously, you know, everybody feels these things differently. Every autistic person feels these things differently. We do not tend to take part in these kind of public grief fests when famous people die. I mean, I remember when I was a child and Princess Diana died, and you know, the whole nation was in a state of shock and mourning. You know, her funeral was one of the most watched TV shows of all time, you know. And I just felt nothing at all. You know, I just thought it was a big fuss about, you know, well, some famous person died, so what? You know, why is everyone upset? I just thought it was really annoying, to be honest. You know, I suppose it's sort of sad that, you know, she had 2 small boys who had lost their mum and all that kind of thing, but, you know, it's, if I'm going to get upset about everybody ever who dies, then I'm going to be a very sad person, you know. I didn't know her, you know, she meant nothing to me. I mean, I'd heard her name, I'd sort of seen her in the news and stuff, but I had no particular relationship to her, no attachment to her, you know, she's just some princess who died, you know, it was nothing. I mean, even celebrities that I've liked, when they die, you know, it's not important to me. I think, oh dear, David Bowie died, that's sad. What else happened today? You know, it's not important. You know, he made lots of music. That's, you know, that's what I know him for. I enjoy his music. He's dead. And there won't be any more, you know. A bit of a shame. Ultimately, life goes on, you know. It's just not particularly an issue. I don't join in these you know, big public grief fests when well-known people die. And still, years and years later, it's the done thing to you know, sort of go on about how great they were and, you know, not sort of allow any kind of criticism of them because they're dead. And that just strikes me as being, you know, completely irrational. You know, you can still say that someone who has died has done a bad thing. I mean, unless, you know, it's, you know, kind of like Jimmy Savile, who turned out to be an absolute, well, you know who Jimmy Savile is, I'm sure you do. Just not really words, are there? And he went from being like the much loved national treasure to, you know, well, yeah, the epitome of evil. Just in a matter of weeks, really, as all these sort of accusations against him kept coming out and being substantiated, and more people coming forward. Yes, criticism of Tommy Savile is perfectly justified, I'm sure. But yeah, generally, you know, if you say, well, I had a discussion on Facebook actually recently. Somebody was talking about Freddie Mercury. Did he knowingly spread AIDS before his death? You know, and lots of people in the comments were defending him and saying, "Oh, he was such a great rock star. He was, you know, such a much loved part of our national culture." You know, I think, well, yeah, but that's not the point. You know, did he or did he not knowingly spread AIDS? You know, that's the discussion here. And yeah, people were just not willing to discuss it because, you know, he died. He was sort of almost a saint in their eyes, you know, some sort of martyr for the cause of AIDS awareness or something, even though he never admitted he actually had AIDS until he was about to die. I don't know. Yes, it's discussion, you know, discussion we could have. But just this sort of inability to accept criticism of famous people until they just sort of become the devil incarnate, because they died. They're sort of beyond reproach once they die. I just find that very, very difficult to understand. You know, why would you not allow a reasonable, balanced validation of someone's life after they die? Why have we sort of got to pretend that everything they did was wonderful just because they're dead? So yeah, I had a miscarriage last weekend. It was quite an early miscarriage. It wasn't particularly painful or bad in any way, really. I mean, I know some people have, terrible hemorrhaging and, they're in agony for days and they have to go to hospital. And it was pretty tame as miscarriages go. And I was just lying in bed and suddenly I felt blood start to come. Went to the toilet, a lot of blood just sort of dribbled out. And then I had a just sort of fairly ordinary period, really. I mean, for the rest of the day, I sort of felt very achy around my belly. It was nothing unbearable. Got worse for about 4 hours and then died away. And that was it. That was the death of my second child. And I put it on Facebook, that it had happened. I was trying to reason with myself, why did I feel the need to put it on Facebook, tell everybody I knew? And I think one thing was I'd already started telling people I was pregnant, so that there were several people I needed to tell. I was no longer pregnant, false alarm, And then we had to wonder, am I sort of somehow fishing for sympathy here? And then I had to kind of justify myself. Well, of course I'm allowed to have sympathy. I've just had a miscarriage. That's a terrible thing to happen to someone. I'm allowed to ask for sympathy. I'm allowed to ask for support. I'm allowed to ask people to send me cute animal pictures, and I'm allowed to take a day off work sick. And you don't know. When the blood starts coming, how long it's going to keep coming for. You don't know when the pain starts, how bad it's going to get. Of course, I'm allowed a day off work, And I had a week's holiday, starting the day afterwards, so, I was off anyway. And that was just sort of good luck, really, good timing. And although I didn't feel any sort of immediate visceral grief, I didn't suddenly start crying and screaming and feeling like it was the end of the world. I did sort of go into a wounded animal mode. I just wanted to stay in, did loads of crocheting. I had no particular desire to do anything. I sort of fell into a depression, I suppose. I'm just trying to distract myself. But yeah, my anxiety was very bad, my agoraphobia. Well, it still is. I still am getting quite bad anxiety attacks and agoraphobia. But yeah, it was all quite, low level. I can't really describe any particular outward display of being upset at all. I told my son, because I told him, a few days before, oh, you're going to be a big brother, there's a little baby in my belly. And I sort of explained to him how it grows bigger and bigger, and then it comes out and, you have a little baby. So I told him, oh, the little baby in my tummy, it's died. It's not going to be born now. There won't be a little baby. I'll have to wait a bit longer to be a big brother. And he said, oh, that's sad. I said, yes, it's very sad. He said, are you sad? Yes, Mum is very sad. So he went outside and he was playing on his little slide. He came over to me and said, and he took my hand and led me to the slide. He said, Mummy, if you go down the slide, that'll cheer you up. Thanks, kid. That is my emotional support child. So cute. Mummy, you go down the slide, that'll cheer you up. I think he understands, the concept of death. He understands that, things go away and they don't come back. Because about a year ago, my granddad died. And, we'd be expecting it for a very long time. He was very ill. He had very bad dementia. He'd been sort of bedridden for months. We'd just been, every time the phone rang, I thought, oh, crap, it's granddad. So it's actually sort of more of a relief when he died. And, I told him, we're not going to go and see Grandad Bob anymore because he's died. And he's sort of, okay. And then a while later he said, oh, are we going to go and see Grandad Bob? Because I used to take him to the old people's home we were in quite a lot, and he'd sort of play on the floor and run around and say hello to all the residents, and all the staff would make a fuss of him, And he used to quite like going, I think. And he said, oh, are we going to go and see Grandad Bob today? I said, no, we can't go and see Grandad Bob because he's died. That means we'll never go and see him again. And he didn't seem, particularly upset or anything. Oh, right, okay. Just like I told him we weren't going to go to the park today or something. He seemed to understand. He's not asked about it again. Sometimes he sort of asks about Grandad Bob. He remembers he had a great granddad. He remembers going to visit him. He recognised him in photos, but he doesn't ask to go and see him anymore. He understands that, that's the end. And I think that's very much how I feel bereavement. It's just the end. I'm not going to see Grandad anymore. And it's sad. It's very sad. It's like, the end of anything that you really enjoyed, that you loved. I'm never going to be able to see my granddad anymore, and that's a shame. But as I say, it's like a special case because he had dementia for a long time. He had been very ill. We were expecting it. Been expecting it for a long time. I prepared myself. But even when a death's a shock, it's I don't go through the same grieving process that neurotypical people expect to go through. Like when my nan died 20 years ago, I was 15, and she was probably the person closest to me in my life. Because my mum was a single parent, she worked shifts. She left me with my nan and granddad a lot when I was a child. I spent probably half my life literally at their house, but not at school. She was like a second mum to me. She'd always been sort of very supportive when I was being bullied at school and things like that. She was, she was just the person I loved and admired most in the world. And she was only 69. She wasn't ancient. And she just sort of fell on the floor one night. She had a brain hemorrhage. And I was there. I saw it. I kind of held her as she laid on the floor. The ambulance came. We took her to hospital. And she died a few days later. She'd been in a coma. But yeah, it was just like that. She was just getting ready to go to bed, and then she was laid on the floor, unconscious. It was that, just in a moment. And again, I didn't cry. I mean, I fell into a very long and deep depression afterwards. But I didn't have any sort of outward display of grief. I didn't immediately feel particularly upset. I kind of knew I should feel upset. I should be crying. I should be sort of wanting to, you know, tell everybody how awful it was. But I didn't. And that was, you know, the first time someone close to me had died. And I was sort of navigating my way through, you know, all these feelings that I felt I should have, that I didn't have, all these things I should be doing that I wasn't doing, and sort of trying to make some sort of sense of, you know, why I felt like this. I mean, obviously I missed my nan, in the same way that I missed her when she went on holiday and I couldn't see her for a week, you know. But I always rationalised it, you know. She had a bad back, she was in pain, she's not in pain anymore, you know. Everybody dies eventually. You know, it's just something we've got to deal with, you know. I just kept rationalising it all the time, and sort of coming up with, you know, reasons to not upset myself, and then trying to have this debate in my mind, you know, why am I thinking this? Did I not really care about my nan? Will other people think I won't care about my nan? And, you know, as time's gone on and more of my relatives have passed away, I've had this same response of, you know, not feeling that upset, you know, just like, you know, I felt when I lost my watch, you know. I'm sad that my watch has gone missing and I won't see it again, but hey ho, you know, it's not the end of the world. Yeah, and in my mind I'm always sort of putting a kind of philosophical spin on things. You know, I look back at, you know, happy times I spent with my nan or my granddad or anyone else I know who's died, and, you know, it's sort of sad that that'll never happen again. I'll never talk to them again, you know. But I'm no more sad than I would be if I thought about, you know, an exciting thing that I did when I was a child, you know, like a holiday I went to, something like that, and thinking that, you know, I'll never go there again, I'll never feel like that again, I'll never, you know, see this beautiful view again, you know. And I feel myself very often falling into this idea of, you know, don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. And, you know, these sort of, I mean, they sound like sort of trite metaphors, you know, and little epitaph, you know, sort of sayings that don't really mean a lot. But in a way, I kind of take them quite seriously, you know. And it's the same with kind of other traumatic events in my life. Sorry, that's my cuckoo clock going off. It's 10 o'clock. It's broken. It just cuckoos as many times as it wants. I don't know, it's, oh, there we go, it's finished. I altered the time one year, and it just sort of set a bit haywire, and it's supposed to be self-correcting, but it's not. And yeah, when I think about kind of other traumatic events in my life, or things that are supposed to be traumatic, you know, I didn't have that kind of emotional response that I was supposed to have, you know, like when my parents broke up. I was only 4, but I rationalised it. You know, it's for the best. You know, they argue a lot. They won't be arguing anymore if they break up. You know, I moved in with my grandparents for a while and quite like that. You know, I like living with a nan and granddad. But yeah, that, you know, everyone sort of assumes that, you know, because my parents broke up, I was sort of quite traumatised by that and very, you know, deeply upset by it for many years. I wasn't. I mean, maybe because I was very young at the time, you know, you just sort of accept things like that when you're a child. You know, you just sort of deal with it and think it's sort of a normal state of affairs. You just sort of take one day at a time when you're very small. But yeah, I didn't, and I never sort of felt like I was missing out on anything by not having a dad or anything like that. Well, I did have my dad. You know, he's still, I'm still in touch with my dad. You know, he's still kind of part of my life. He's always sort of paid his maintenance and everything, and had me at holidays and things. But yeah, having him around in the house all the time, you know, there's just some sort of assumption that I'd miss my dad or I'd be missing out on something by not having a dad around constantly. But I never felt that. I never. I mean, the only thing I got upset about was, you know, people being judgmental about me because I was, you know, as single parent child. Yeah, I mean, not having my dad around constantly didn't bother me at all. But yeah, I think there is an autistic response to death. Certainly, you know, I've talked to people about this, as I say, on some of my support groups, and yeah, a lot of people are saying the same thing. I think it's definitely a discussion that needs to be had. Something that yeah, researchers ought to look into as well, because it's you know, death is a big part of life. And contemplating my own death as well, you know, I don't particularly fear dying, you know, I'm aware it's something that is going to happen. Sometimes I worry that, you know, if I die young, you know, what's going to happen to my son, that sort of thing. But I can talk about it, you know, dispassionately, you know, my own death. It's going to happen one day. There's nothing you can do about it, you know, it's... I'm alive now, one day I won't be, you know. If I make it to 80, I'll have done reasonably well. Hope it's not too painful. Yeah, it's just something that I'm fairly accepting of. You know, one day I will not be here. Fingers crossed my son will have grown up by then and be able to deal with not having a mum around. But yeah, it's something that will happen, and it doesn't particularly bother me to think about it. But yeah, I know a lot of people don't even like to say the word death. You know, they're afraid of it. They sort of feel like it's, you know, they have kind of some sort of superstition that it's going to, you know, bring on somebody's death if you say the word. Yeah, I think, you know, it's maybe it's the autistic rationality. You know, I don't particularly feel any kind of superstition about it. I find, you know, when somebody has died, you know, I kind of philosophise about it a lot, you know, and I start to wonder, you know, what, you know, is there a soul? What happens to the soul? You know, that kind of thing, you know, any of the religions. You know, and any of them have particularly nice ideas about the afterlife. And I quite often have dreams about the person who's died in which, you know, I know that they're dead, but they've sort of come back for a little while. Or dream about them sort of travelling through some sort of afterlife, vision of the afterlife, I don't know. I remember when my nana died, this was 2018, I had this dream, you know, I mean, she had cancer, I was expecting it. I had this dream that her husband, my granddad, who died before I was born, I've never met him, but I've seen photos of him, so I knew what he looked like. I dreamed that he was driving around town, near where she lived, in this green Jaguar. And then he stopped it outside a house and he started walking up the garden path. And I was sitting in a front room, you know, watching through the window. I see this green Jaguar park up and my granddad walking up the path. And I woke up and I just imagined, you know, I started constructing this sort of vision of, you know, my granddad taking my nana's spirit off to the afterlife and, you know, taking her back to her family somewhere. You know, because she was the last of her brothers and sisters left alive, and I sort of imagined that she was going back and seeing all her brothers and sisters again, and her parents and all her friends who died, and having this little party in the afterlife, and having a sort of welcome party for it. And it was just this sort of really nice vision that I conjured up myself when I heard she died, and it I don't know, it was happy, you know, I felt, you know, very happy when I was imagining that. You know, even though I don't actually believe in an afterlife, I was just sort of picturing her spirit, you know, sort of mingling with, you know, the spirits of everyone else that she knew, and, you know, them being pleased to see her and things. I think it was just a, you know, for me, a really, a very lovely image. That, you know, I enjoyed making up. Yeah, and it's the dreams that kind of get me emotionally more than what's actually happened. And after my nan died, my other grandmother, the one who died in my teens, I used to dream about her quite often. I'd often dream that, you know, she had actually come back from the dead to visit us, or to protect me from, you know, being chased by a rapist or something like that. And yeah, a lot of these dreams, I'd wake up and sometimes after the dream I'd be crying. But then, you know, I'd dry my eyes and I'd go about my day, and, you know, life would go on. It was the dreams that really hit me emotionally, and that I immediately responded to. Whereas in real life I was, I wouldn't say not bothered, but you know, just, I could get on with, you know, going to work and, you know, doing everything I had to do day to day without being particularly hindered by feelings of grief. I don't know. Anyway, I've talked long enough. It's getting up to 35 minutes now. Yes, put something in the comments if you have any feelings about the autistic grieving process. Let me know how it feels. If you feel up to that. I mean, obviously, a lot of people don't particularly want to talk about these things. That's fine too. You do you. There is no proper way of doing this. Grief hits everyone differently. And I'll see you in the next one.